This is the Dollemore Daily.
Hi, I'm Mike Greiner from the Democratic Activist Channel, and I'm sitting in for Jesse while he moves from sunny California to snowy D.C. so he can better cover the national political scene for us. Unfortunately, even while he's moving, the news never stops, so let's talk politics today. And what's prompting this video is an email I received from a retired first sergeant from the Army, who at one point had been a member of a militia and a right-wing conservative. He has been appalled, though, by the behavior of his fellow conservatives and their embracing of political violence and their efforts essentially to overturn the constitutional system which defines the United States. This retired hero has a lot of basis for his concerns, unfortunately. Recent polling shows that Republicans are increasingly accepting political violence and are 2 to 3 times more likely than Democrats to support political violence. In sheer numbers, if you look at the number of Republicans who support violence against the government, even though it seems like a small percentage, 10% of Republicans, that number equates to 10 million people across the country. And what's more is the research finds that the more loyal someone is to the Republican Party, the more prone they are to violence. Interestingly enough, this predisposition toward violence among Republicans has actually been increasing over the last couple of years. While there has been no increase among Democrats, and Democrats in general are strongly opposed to it, support among Republicans doubled from 20% to 40%. Now, none of this should be surprising if you've been paying attention to the rhetoric coming out of Republican leaders. I mean, they either minimize the January 6th assault on the Capitol. I mean, who could forget Representative Andrew Clyde from Georgia comparing the mob's breaching of the building to a normal tourist visit? Well, that's like no tourist visit I've ever been on. Or in the alternative, what they're doing is lionizing the people who basically staged a treasonous invasion of the Capitol. The first time the Capitol has been breached since the War of 1812 by the British. I mean, we have Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona calling Ashley Babbitt's killing an execution. And he called her a young lady, a veteran, wrapped in an American flag that was killed in the U.S. Capitol. And at the same time, he turned his back, ignoring the deaths of law enforcement officers who were busy protecting the Capitol. But most of all, we have Donald Trump, who throughout his entire career has been encouraging political violence. I mean, who can forget his comment about the Black Lives Matter protests, that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Not exactly what one would consider a measured response to criminal activity, potentially, even though he didn't really have any evidence of looting going on anyway. And when somebody body slammed a reporter in a Trump rally, his response was, quote, "Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my kind of guy." And he encourages police to enact violence upon suspects they arrest without any kind of criminal proceedings first. For example, he said, "Now, we're getting the criminals out anyway, but we'd like to get them out a lot faster, and when you see these towns and when you see these thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, you just see them thrown in rough." I said, "Please don't be too nice. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way they put their hand over, like, don't hit their head, and they've just killed somebody. Don't hit their head," I said. "You can take their hands away, okay?" So in other words, he's saying that to people who have not even been charged with crimes yet, that the police should rough them up. But most of all, the damage that he has done is in dehumanizing his political opponents in the media. I mean, who can forget his referencing Mexican immigrants as rapists and drug dealers when he was first announcing his campaign for office? And his repeatedly calling the media the enemy of the American people. Well, that kind of dehumanization makes it much easier for people to enact violence against these groups. The sad truth is, though, this is part of an overall strategy that Republicans are engaging in preparation for their coup against the American people. I mean, you can see this happening on a daily basis. You have Texas Governor Greg Abbott telling the National Guard that President Biden is not their commander-in-chief. What's more is you have 6 Republican governors across the country basically treating National Guard troops and state police as their own political hit squads, sending them down to Texas so that they can seem tough on immigration. One in particular, South Dakota's Kristi Noem, funded it with contributions from a right-wing billionaire, showing just really who's behind all of this violence and what it's really all about. And this comes after everything we've heard about what happened in Portland and the protests there, with people literally being whisked off the streets by unidentified law enforcement officials. And it turns out now that the FBI deployed surveillance teams inside the Portland protests. Now, the irony is that didn't happen in the runoff to January 6th. In fact, every effort was made to ignore all the warning signs that there was a potential riot coming on January 6th. Makes you wonder what the difference was. Well, again, as that retired Army First Sergeant pointed out, this is all part of an effort to essentially politicize the Army and law enforcement. In fact, he pointed out that militias are aggressively recruiting people inside National Guards, with the goal of turning them into political agents rather than nonpartisan guardians of the American Constitution. This concern, of course, was echoed by 3 retired Army generals who wrote an editorial expressing concern that the Army needs to essentially be cleansed of these right-wing political elements, because the concern that these generals had is that these people could easily see their mission as one of supporting the Republican ticket and not one of protecting the American democracy. I must admit, as an American who cares about democracy, I'm worried. Well, if you're worried too, or if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to see your comments down below. And if you could check out my channel, Democratic Activist, maybe you could click it. We'll post a link down below as well. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, let's hope for some continued progress. Thank you.